I'm Zoe Masters from the Plymouth Virtual School for Children in Care. I'm not the virtual school head teacher or the head teacher of the virtual school, but I have been doing this for about 14 years now. So I've been supporting the education of children in care for a long time. And for a long time in Plymouth, we've considered adoption and children who are moving to adoption and post-adoption as part of our virtual school. So what is a virtual school, just for those of you who don't know? Since 1989, we've had to have a responsibility to promote the education of our children in care. And since 2014, we've had to have a nominated officer at the local authority, and they're called the virtual school head teacher. How that looks different in different authorities, but we do have really strong links with all of our colleagues in the South West. We meet together on a regular basis, and we also meet as a national cohort of virtual school head teachers. So there's a strong conversation happening amongst different local authorities already, and working very closely together about what we must currently deliver that's part of our statutory responsibilities. But where are we going? Well, the Children and Social Work Bill is currently in Parliament. I had a look today to see at which stage we're up to, and apparently there's a stage called ping pong, which is where it's at. So it's been through the House of Commons, it's been through the House of Lords, it's been back to the House of Commons. It's had all its amendments, it's had people considering those amendments, it's been out for consultation, and ping pong, I believe, is that final stage of neatening up where there may be any further discrepancies. But what I can say is, following the bill very closely, I get 6 or 7 emails a day updating me on the latest tweak that somebody's made. There's been nobody that has opposed clauses 4 to 7. So clauses 4 to 7 say that virtual school head teacher role that's currently in local authorities will soon also consider children who've been adopted from care, left care under a special guardianship order, and in some cases child arrangement order. And the DfE will refer to those children, and I'm not a fan of the term, but it's the term the DfE is using, of post-lac. So they have to have had an episode in care of some shape or form in order to qualify, which is why they're not just calling them adopted children, because there will be different circumstances. So as long as there's an episode in care, virtual school head teachers are going to have some level of responsibility for them. That in turn means that school governing bodies currently have to have a designated teacher for children in care. They're going to have a designated teacher for those children who are post-lac. In Plymouth, and we're different to some authorities, we do less than some and more than others, and this is an emerging picture. The National Association of Virtual School Head Teachers met just last week, and this was very much on the agenda about where we're going in terms of us as virtual schools. PAC UK and Adoption UK were represented at that conference, talking to us about what that was going to look like. Being openly and honest with you, there are some virtual head teachers who are very worried about their capacity to meet some of this, but they're still talking about it, so it's very much under discussion. So in Plymouth, for a long time, we've worked promoting that achievement and improved outcomes for those children adopted from care. And I'm sure there's colleagues from Somerset in the room, and we've been using your EPAC often to do that, which has been around for a really long time now. Drawn up by a psychologist several years ago, it's a document that allows us to facilitate an educational discussion between home and school. We help facilitate it in the first instance and then hand it over to schools as a tool to carry on that conversation. We find we're often asked about pupil premium. That's a really tricky one, but we can give where it sits at the moment under the terms and conditions of the grant, which is pupil premium for children who are post-lac goes direct to school, and it's up to school how they use it. That's how it currently stands. We've got really good links with our adoption support team, many of whom I can see in the audience today. We're really lucky in that we've got a dedicated member of staff, a learning mentor within our virtual school who focuses entirely on those children, making the move from care to adoption and providing advice and support for those children who are and have been adopted for a number of years. And school, I could duplicate her many times over for the amount of times I get a request from school for her to go and do a piece of work. She works directly with young people and she works with families. And actually it's the work with families that we get the most positive feedback from. A lot of our work is signposting, and I think a lot of our future work is going to be about making those connections and links and continuing to signposting. Gaps, there are many. We could probably have had the afternoon just looking at what those gaps are and how you would like them filled. But that's just a question to hold with us. This is kind of the picture we've presented to our schools to now, and this is purely our thoughts. This isn't legislation because the guidance hasn't been produced, but this is our thinking around what's going to happen. And in timescales, we think that it's likely that that legislation will be passed before the next academic year. and then we'll have 12 months to implement it before it becomes absolutely statute and before the new financial years kick in, and we may see some changes. So we're very aware that we're going to have to up our training. We'll be working with our adoption colleagues to make sure we get the right message into schools. Our schools are going to have a willingness to undertake that training. At the moment, the guidance says it's statutory for annual training about children in care. We need the guidance to say the same, that it's statutory for annual training about our children who have been adopted. The virtual school can currently challenge and support schools around pupil premium. And this is the area that we're really not sure about. For our looked after children, the local authority often shares PR, and we have a corporate responsibility. We're corporate parents for our children in care. Making that challenge is easy. We can go in and point our fingers at head teachers and say, you are not spending it directly on these children. Post-legislation, we're still not going to have any elements of PR or corporate parent responsibility for our post-LAC children. So how high that level of challenge goes, we don't know. We're certainly going to be asking schools to describe the impact, but up until now, it hasn't been specifically about children adopted. It's been about all of their vulnerable and disadvantaged groups. We do an awful lot of work in Plymouth, and I know in other local authorities, about that emotional well-being, and Julie talked very much about attachment. It's really high on our agenda. We've got 3/4 of our schools in Plymouth now that would consider themselves attachment-friendly schools, and we're keeping that bandwagon rolling, and there's NICE guidance, and there's virtual school head teacher guidance, and there's going to be DFE guidance, so that's really high up there. That emotional well-being is a key factor. So again, schools are going to have to consider what is that impact of those early traumas on those children in their schools. And I was really pleased to see today, I had a link come from the Association of Head Teachers, a new resource called Becoming an Adoption-Friendly School is being produced next month. So that will be fantastic. We're going to have a look at that and we'll roll it out if we think it's an appropriate resource for schools to be using. The DFE does collect data on children adopted from care. It keeps it suppressed. It's not some of the data that it shares more widely, but schools have to complete a census in order to get the pupil premium. One of those boxes on the census is post-LAC. If they tick the post-LAC box, that data gets pulled out of the pupil database and collated in terms of outcomes, so the educational performance of our children who are post-LAC. We think not only is that going to be collected by the DFE, but it will be reported on post this legislation. So schools will be held accountable for the performance of those children as well. The pupil voice runs as a theme through all of the work we do. It was mentioned earlier today, Emma, you talked about the pupil voice. We think it's really important. So of all the work we'll be doing, we're making sure that the child and pupil voice is heard as we go through that process. What next? Those two blue highlighted ones currently exist for our looked after children. They are being rewritten in consultation with the National Association of Virtual School Head Teachers about what it's going to look like to reflect the changes from that bill. The National Association is very new, but it's really raising the profile of virtual schools. And when we know what the legislation says, we will be rolling that out. We'll be raising our profile to families as well as our professional colleagues about what we can do within the virtual school. We're huge fans of sharing good practice, and this whole regional way of working means that becomes much more easy. And the last one really is the health warning one. This is in my perfect world. What will happen next is I will build resources and capacity, and I'll be able to provide more than enough support for all our post-LAC children. But you know what that one hangs on? That one hangs on funding. That one hangs on somebody giving us enough resources to be able to do those pieces of work. We're really passionate about it, and I think the whole region is really strong on what we do provide, but it was really clear at the national conference that that's not the case everywhere, and it's going to be a big drive to make sure that there is enough resource and capacity to support the needs of all these children. I think that's probably me rushing through it for you all, and I didn't really want to keep you here much longer. That's me at the end.
Any questions for Zoe?